good afternoon to everyone. Distinguished speakers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me on behalf of the Ministry of, very mouthful, very long name of my ministry, Ministry of Natural Resources, Environment and Climate Change. The idea here is not to share our best practices in implementing EFT, but rather we would like to learn more from India and China, for instance, in further improving our EFT implementation that was started in 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, looking at my presentation outline, I will firstly share a little bit of background of how we can link EFT with our sectoral policy, namely the national policy on biological diversity. Then I will cover a little bit of EFT implementation in Malaysia and its potential impact. Why I put there potential? Because we are a newcomer in EFT implementation. Very premature for us to say that we have successfully implemented EFT, or EFT has significantly contributed to the ultimate goal of increasing our protected areas cover. And finally, I will give a little bit of conclusion. Before we start, I would like to highlight here that Malaysia is one of the 17 mega-diverse countries, which hold at least 60 to 70% of global biodiversity. For this reason, we need a strong concerted effort from various stakeholders to safeguard our biodiversity. And one of the fiscal tools that can be leveraged in this regard is by EFT. For biodiversity conservation, we have formulated national policy on biological diversity to provide a framework and also guideline for us to better manage the biodiversity in our country. The ultimate goal is to conserve our biodiversity, to promote its sustainable use, and last but not least, to ensure fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising from the utilization of biological resources. As you can see from the diagram, it has 5 overarching goals, from goal number 1 to goal number 2, and each of the goal and the goals are supported by targets, and each target has different kind of actions to support the implementation. These are the detail of the goals and the target. I will skip this. But I would like to highlight here that the intention of having the financial mechanism to support biodiversity conservation has been demonstrated in the national policy way back in 2016 under Action 17.3 to explore and implement new and innovative financing mechanisms to provide the much needed funding for biodiversity conservation. It can be in the form of non-market or market-based mechanism. Now let's look at the EFT implementation in Malaysia. I would like to stress over here that from our perspective, EFT is not a compensation. It is merely an incentive, as an additional incentive from the federal government to the state governments to protect and conserve protected areas, which are also areas that are important for ecological, for ecosystem services, such as water catchment and also for wildlife conservation. But before we move further, perhaps I can tell a little bit of our unique arrangement of biodiversity management. The federal constitution, the supreme law of our country, provides for the separation of powers between federalization and also states. Land, forests, natural resources matters appear on state list, whereas federal has executive power in providing technical and financial support in order to achieve the national agenda. The EFT was first introduced in 2019, and it was managed by the Ministry of Finance. It was then continued in 2021 with 70 million allocation, followed by 70 million in 2022. And in recent budget speech, the Honorable Prime Minister has announced that the EFT allocation will be increased to 150 million ringgit Malaysia, not US dollar. So 150 million is approximately around 33 million US dollar. As I mentioned earlier, it was introduced by the Ministry of Finance, and it was also managed by the Ministry of Finance for the period of 2019 to 2021. And it was made under the level of economic infrastructure and well-being development-based grants. In this regard, the Ministry of Finance has issued guideline for EFT implementation under Treasury Circular with 9 scopes. And as you can see on the screen, the formula, the distribution formula was based on the area of states PA over area of overall PA plus areas of states PA over area of states land. Why do we came out with this kind of distribution formula? First and foremost, our state size is not similar. So the idea is to ensure that at least small states can get 500,000 ringgit Malaysia. That was the idea. In this regard, we were not looking at the quality aspect. Rather, we actually move on to look at the quantitative aspect as a start. Then, when in beginning 2022, my ministry, the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, in 2022, was given the mandate to manage EFT. But this time it was not under tahap, the development-based grant, but it is a special allocation from the Ministry of Finance. What we did in the first place is to come out with one guideline by incorporating the performance-based criteria. So from beginning of not looking at the quality aspect, in 2022 onward, we are now putting a certain percentage of quality aspect in the distribution formula, what we call it as a performance-based criteria or result-based criteria. These are the scopes outlined in the guideline. There are 6 scopes. The first one is on conservation of existing protected areas and gazettement of new protected areas. This is our ultimate scope, where we want to get more and more areas to be gazetted as a new protected area. Number 2, conservation, restoration, and enrichment to maintain protected areas. 3, development and management of facilities in protected areas. 4 is on enforcement of how we can intensify enforcement by putting more intelligence officers and enforcement officers on the ground. Number 5, community engagement and capacity building. And number 6, to check the compliance of states to the sustainable forest management practices. In the context of Malaysia, when we talk about protected areas, it includes permanent reserve forests, wildlife sanctuaries, marine protected areas, environmentally sensitive areas, international important areas, and vulnerable ecosystem. All these areas are legal protected areas. That means they must be a gazettement, and they must also be endorsed by respective states in order to gazette this area. As compared to the previous formula, this time we introduced 30% performance-based criteria, where evaluation based on the performance of EFT implementation in the previous years. So if they utilize the allocation and get better impact, I will share with you the score afterwards, they will get more. But the highest score for this purpose is 30%. We also take into account the threshold value of 200,000. This actually very important for us to update our protected area master list, so that it's easier for us to measure the achievement, or whether there is an increase or decrease of percentage in our protected area. 70% is still looking at the percentage of protected area, but this time the formula is area of state's PA over area of state's land, similar to the 30% for performance-based criteria. Looking at the slide on the performance-based criteria, the score is as high as 10%, and the lowest is 2%, and the weightage are based on TL, means not implemented, BS, below target, and CS, achieved. The moment they plan and they fully implemented the program activities according to the scope, they can get 10%, or according to the score that's indicated in the slide. This is the disbursement mechanism. We received the money from the Ministry of Finance in February, March. Then we will disburse the money to the state financial officers according to the distribution formula. They need to spend the allocation within the same year. And finally, we put in place monitoring, reporting, and evaluation component, where the states need to submit annual planning in December. For instance, in 2023, they need to submit the annual planning by December 2022, and we also monitor the half-year reporting and also the annual reporting. This is the reporting template. We put clearly on the scope and also the project cost, and also looking at the target and outcome. We are very optimistic on EFT, frankly. That is why, from the Ministry of Natural Resources point of view, the moment Ministry of Finance introduced EFT, we are very happy, and we looking forward that EFT can be a significant tool to incentivize state to better taking care of their protected areas. Looking back at the national policy on biological diversity, the ultimate goal of EFT from our point of view is to increase our protected areas. It is clearly stated under Target 6 by 2025, at least 20% of terrestrial areas and inland waters, and 10% of coastal and marine areas are conserved through a representative system of protected areas, and this include OECM, other effective area-based conservation measures. Perhaps many of you would like to know what is our current achievement. Our current achievement as of now is 13% for terrestrial and 10% for marine protected areas. We only have another 2 years' time, and we hope that the intervention by using EFT can provide a greater impact. And beside target 6, EFT is also potentially support other target as well. If you look at the red box, there are at least 8 targets under the national policy that can be benefited from EFT implementation. Last but not least, for conclusion, very premature for us to talk about the achievement of EFT, but using the existing mechanism, we hope that by incentivizing states, they can become more aware and more encouraged to conserve biodiversity, and we hope that this tool can achieve or support NPBD targets and provide multiple benefits to the states. If we look at the 6 scopes just now, it is not only about conserving biodiversity, but it is also about how to enhance the livelihood people surrounding the protected areas. The theory of change is that we need to institutionalize EFT. We need to learn more of how we could strengthen EFT implementation in Malaysia. After 4 years of its implementation, there is a need to measure the impact of EFT, to find what are the gaps so that we can address the gap properly. And I think we should use EFT to gain impact. Yeah, we gain impact by introducing the quality indicators. Finally, sustaining EFT, policy, legal, institutional review to identify the possible pathways for sustaining EFT in the long term. And I strongly believe by having our sharing session platform like this, it can further equip us of how to do the better way in EFT implementation. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I conclude my presentation, and I would happy to hear feedback and also questions from the floor. Thank you very much.